It was one of those still, heavy nights when the world seemed to hold its breath. Only the hum of my car and the soft rustle of leaves broke the silence as I drove home past midnight. The road was empty, just the glow of distant streetlights stretching across the dark asphalt. But when I spotted a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror, trailing me relentlessly, the solitude I usually enjoyed turned into a slow-growing fear. No matter how many turns I took, they stayed behind me, matching my every move. Finally, desperate, I swerved into a side street, cut my lights, and waited, heart pounding. The headlights rolled past, and that's when I realized there was no car attached to them. Next story. It started as a harmless glitch, a random doorbell ring at odd hours. No one ever there when I opened the door. At first, I thought it was a prank, but night after night, it kept happening. I replaced the doorbell with a brand new one, equipped with a camera. Yet the ringing continued, even though the footage showed nothing but a dark, empty porch. One night, fed up, I waited just inside the door with a bat. The bell rang. I swung the door open and found deep footprints in the snow leading up to my door, then stopping cold, like someone had simply vanished. Next story, I woke up to an unusually quiet apartment. No signs of my roommate, Dave. His bedroom door was ajar, his things gone. On the fridge, a hastily scribbled note. Trust is fragile. What started as mild confusion spiraled into something worse when I found hidden cameras in the vents. Dave had been tracking my every move, conversations, habits, even private moments. I never saw him again, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear faint clicks, like a recording device hidden somewhere just out of sight. Next story. When my neighbor Robert disappeared, I didn't think much of it. He was a bit of a loner. But after weeks of silence and newspapers piling up at his door, I grew uneasy. One evening, curiosity got the better of me, and I slipped into his unlocked apartment. Everything was frozen in time. A half-eaten meal on the table, lights still on. In the center of his living room sat a single envelope addressed to me. Inside, one line, "You're next." I ran. I never went back, and I never found out what Robert had meant. Next story. Coming home to find my front door ajar was terrifying enough. Stepping inside and seeing everything overturned was worse. Drawers emptied, papers shredded, but nothing valuable was missing. Not money, not electronics, just my journals, my personal notes, my memories. Recovery took months, but the feeling of being hunted never faded. Even now, sometimes, I find pages from my stolen journals tucked into random places. My mailbox, my glove compartment, even my pillowcase. Whoever took them is still reading my life, like a book. Next story. One morning, a missed call from an unknown number. No voicemail. I ignored it. But the calls kept coming. Silent at first. Then came the whispers. Descriptions of my clothes, my route to work, conversations I'd had. Someone was watching me. I changed my number, moved apartments, even quit my job. But it didn't stop. Last week, I got a new text. Starting over won't save you. No number, just the message, floating like a ghost across my screen. Next story. Sorting through old trunks in my attic, I found an ancient diary. Henry Lawson's journal. A glimpse into a life long past. But the last entry shook me. It described, in chilling detail, my visit to a cafe just the day before, including what I ordered, what I wore, and the exact words I had spoken. The diary ended with one final sentence. "See you soon." I dropped it and backed away. But sometimes, flipping through the attic, I still feel eyes on me, waiting. Next story. Late one night, Sarah found a tiny hidden camera above her microwave. Heart pounding, she tore through her home. Another one behind the bookshelf. One tucked under the bed. Someone had been watching her for months. The police took the devices, assured her it was over. But Sarah still can't sleep without checking every room twice. Sometimes she swears she hears a faint click in the walls, like someone starting the feed all over again. Next story, I woke up tied to a chair, blindfolded, my mouth dry and heart racing. A dusty old journal lay on my lap. The pages were filled with riddles and instructions. I realized quickly. Solve them or stay trapped. Hours blurred into eternity as I pieced together clues, each more difficult than the last. Finally, my fingers trembling, I solved the last riddle. A door creaked open. I stumbled out into the cold night and realized I was deep in the woods, miles from anywhere. Next story. The first text was simple. Watch your step today. I laughed it off. That afternoon, I slipped on a puddle and shattered my phone. Coincidence, I thought, until more texts came, predicting flat tires, cancelled meetings, even friendships ending. Then one day, the message read, "Today, someone you trust will betray you." That evening, my best friend lied to me about something so small it shouldn't have mattered. But somehow, it cracked everything between us, until all I had left was the cold warning blinking on my new phone. Told you. Next story. It was one of those heavy, breathless nights when the world felt suspended in time. As I drove home past midnight, the road stretched empty ahead, the trees barely whispering. In my rearview mirror, a pair of headlights appeared, following, unwavering. I sped up. They sped up. I turned down random streets. They stayed behind me. When I finally pulled into a crowded gas station, the car vanished like smoke into the night. I never saw the driver's face. I'm not sure I ever really wanted to. Next story. It started as harmless. The doorbell ringing once or twice at strange hours. Always nobody there. At first, I thought it was a prank. Then it happened even when I unplugged the bell. And then the camera I installed showed something worse. At 3:07 a.m., the footage would glitch, just for a second. And there, in the frozen static, a shadowy figure would stand at my doorstep, staring straight into the lens. Next story, I woke up to a strange silence in the apartment. My roommate Dave's room was wide open, his bed neatly made, but his things, wallet, keys, phone, were missing. On the fridge, a scrap of paper. Trust no one. I thought it was some kind of joke until I found the hidden cameras in the smoke detectors and realized Dave hadn't left. He had been studying me, and he might still be watching. Next story. Robert, my neighbor, was quiet but friendly. When he vanished, I figured he had moved away without notice. Weeks later, a leaking ceiling forced the landlord to open Robert's door. Inside, everything was untouched. Food rotting, TV still on. On the coffee table was a letter addressed to me. It said, "You're next if you stay." I moved out that night. I still don't know who sent it. Next story. Coming home to find my door cracked open was terrifying, but stepping inside to see everything trashed, even worse. It wasn't just a robbery. Family photos were shredded. Childhood keepsakes were burned. Whoever broke in didn't want my things. They wanted to erase my life. I moved. I changed everything. But sometimes I find footprints near my windows, and they don't match mine. Next story, I always walked home from the late shift. 5 blocks through sleepy, dimly lit streets. One night, I noticed a second set of footsteps, just slightly out of sync with mine. Every time I stopped, they stopped too. My heart hammered, but when I turned around, there was nothing but mist swirling under the flickering streetlights. I sprinted the last 2 blocks. Later that night, when I went to hang up my coat, I found a muddy footprint next to mine, right inside the door. Next story, the text started simple. Random numbers, meaningless phrases. Turn around. Don't trust them. I blocked number after number, but they kept coming from different senders. Then they got personal. Details about my family, my job, my private fears. I went to the police. They said it was probably a scam. It stopped for 2 weeks. Then, last night, I got a message that made me freeze. You're out of milk. Try buying 2 cartons next time. Next story. Sorting through dusty boxes in my grandmother's attic, I found an old photo album. Every picture showed strangers, smiling couples, children playing, birthday parties, all at houses I'd never seen. In the very last photo, tucked behind a torn page, was a picture of me, wearing clothes I didn't recognize, standing with people I had never met. The photo was dated 2 years before I was even born. Next story, I lived alone in a tiny apartment with paper-thin walls. One night, I heard scratching behind my bedroom wall. I banged on it. Silence. A few hours later, the scratching returned, louder, desperate. I called maintenance the next morning. They opened the wall and found nothing, except an old crumbling note wedged between the beams. It said, "It won't stay hidden forever." Next story. On a dare, my friends and I visited the abandoned house at the edge of town. Its windows were boarded, doors chained shut. But as we circled the back, a side door creaked open by itself. Inside, the air was heavy, wet with decay. We only stayed a few minutes before bolting. That night, I found a Polaroid photo slid under my front door. It was a picture of me standing in that house. And in the photo, there was a hand resting on my shoulder. It started like any other evening. I got home late from work, tossed my keys into the bowl by the door, and collapsed onto the couch. I don't even remember falling asleep. But something woke me around 2 a.m. It wasn't a noise, not exactly. More like a pressure in the air, like the whole apartment was holding its breath. Groggy, I sat up. The TV was off. No lights were on. But the hallway leading to my bedroom seemed wrong. It looked longer somehow, stretched, distorted. I blinked a few times, thinking maybe I was just dreaming. Then I saw him, a figure, standing at the end of the hallway, half shrouded in darkness, tall, thin, wearing something that looked almost like an old-fashioned suit. I couldn't make out his face, just the outline. And he was still. So still, it made my skin crawl. I told myself to get up, turn on a light, do something. But my body wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, heart hammering. He didn't walk toward me. He glided, silent, smooth, like the hallway was pulling him closer. And when he was just a few feet away, I realized his face wasn't a face. It was just a smooth, blank surface. No eyes, no mouth. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to go away. When I opened them, everything was normal again. The hallway was its usual length. No one was there, just the faint hum of my fridge in the kitchen. I didn't sleep that night, and I haven't stayed in that apartment since. Next story. The first package arrived on a Tuesday morning. No return address, Just a plain brown box sitting on my doorstep. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single Polaroid photo. A picture of me, taken from behind as I stood in my kitchen the night before. At first, I laughed it off. Maybe one of my friends was playing a prank. But the next day, another package, another photo. This time, me sitting on the couch, staring at my phone, totally unaware. I changed the locks. I installed cameras. I kept the blinds closed at all hours. It didn't matter. Every morning, a new photo would arrive, showing me the day before, eating dinner, brushing my teeth, sleeping. Always taken from impossible angles. Sometimes from outside, sometimes from inside the house. The final photo wasn't of me. It was of my front door, open, and someone, or something, standing in the doorway. I moved out that night. Next story. They say if you dream of the same place 3 nights in a row, you should never go there. I didn't know that at the time. For 3 nights straight, I dreamed of a crumbling amusement park, rusty rides creaking in the wind, the faded smell of popcorn in the air. In the dream, I always stood in front of the Ferris wheel, staring up at its skeletal frame. On the 4th night, I got a call from an old college friend. She was back in town and wanted to meet at the old abandoned fairgrounds outside the city. She thought it would be spooky fun. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to say no, but I didn't want to seem crazy, so I agreed. When we got there, the place looked exactly like my dream. Same broken rides, same rotting ticket booths, same Ferris wheel looming against the night sky. Half joking, we dared each other to get closer. That's when I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, just standing among the rides, pale, motionless, watching us. I grabbed my friend's arm and ran, not stopping until we were miles away. She still thinks it was just our imagination. I know better. Next story. When the old radio arrived in the mail, I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't ordered anything like that. It was dusty and ancient, with cracked dials and faded lettering. No sender information, no instructions. Just a small handwritten note tucked into the packaging. Only tune to 101.7. Curious and a little creeped out, I plugged it in. It took a minute for the static to clear. Then a voice, low and distorted, filled the room. It wasn't music. It wasn't a broadcast. It was someone whispering my name. I yanked the plug from the wall. Silence. But that night, the radio turned itself back on. No power, no batteries, but there it was, whispering again. Not just my name this time. Full sentences. Don't go outside. They're watching you. Stay still. I didn't listen. I ran to the front door and saw a figure standing just beyond the porch light. Too tall, too still. I slammed the door shut and stayed huddled in the living room until sunrise. When I finally worked up the courage to check, the radio was gone. Next story. The dog started barking at the wall again. It had become a regular thing, always around 3 a.m. He'd stand there, growling low, staring at the same spot in the living room. I thought maybe it was mice, or old pipes creaking, anything but what my gut was telling me. One night, fed up and half asleep, I dragged a chair over and tapped on the wall. Solid, normal. But then, from inside the wall, something tapped back. I froze. My dog whimpered and bolted down the hallway. Slowly, slowly, I pressed my ear against the plaster and heard breathing, heavy, raspy breathing, right on the other side. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next either. On the third night, I woke up to find a crack running from floor to ceiling, where the tapping had been, wide enough now that in the moonlight I could just barely see. Fingers slipping through. I moved out before they found a way in. Next story. I never liked the basement in my childhood home. It wasn't just the smell of damp concrete or the flicker of the old light bulb. It was the feeling that something down there was waiting. One summer, when I was about 13, my parents left me home alone for the weekend. I spent most of my time upstairs, ignoring the basement completely. But on the second night, I heard a noise coming from below. A slow, deliberate dragging sound. I figured it was a burst pipe, or maybe a critter that had gotten in. Grabbing a flashlight, I crept down the wooden stairs. The basement was freezing, much colder than usual. My breath came out in puffs, and the beam of my flashlight shook in my hands. In the center of the room, something was moving under the old, dusty tarp we kept over some storage boxes. The shape was wrong. Bigger than any raccoon or rat. Taller, and the dragging sound was coming from it, like fingernails scraping against the floor. I backed up, ready to bolt, but then the tarp shifted, and a hand slipped out from underneath. Pale, too long, too thin. I ran upstairs so fast I almost broke my neck. I locked the basement door and piled furniture against it. I didn't sleep until my parents came home. When we went to check the basement the next morning, everything was normal, except the floor. It had deep, bloody scratches leading right up to the bottom of the stairs. Next story. I always thought nightmares stayed in your dreams, that they couldn't reach you once you woke up. That changed last winter. I started having the same nightmare every night, walking through an endless hallway, doors lining both sides. Each door had a name scratched into it, names I didn't recognize. I could hear whispers behind each door, growing louder as I walked. At the end of the hallway, there was always a mirror, and every time I looked into it, my reflection smiled back at me, even when I didn't. One night, I jolted awake, heart pounding, sweat pouring down my face. I sat up, trying to shake it off, and then I saw it. The mirror on my bedroom wall, the real mirror, was fogged up, like someone had breathed on it, and written in the condensation were 3 words, "Let me out." I ripped the mirror off the wall and threw it into the trash outside. But sometimes, when the light hits the new mirror just right, I still see a second set of eyes staring back at me. Next story. My grandpa always warned me never to pick up hitchhikers at night. "They're not always what they seem," he'd say with a wink. I thought he was just being old-fashioned. One rainy evening, driving down an empty country road, I saw her, a young woman in a torn white dress, soaking wet, standing on the shoulder with her thumb out. I should have kept driving, but she looked desperate, cold. I pulled over and rolled down the window. She didn't speak, just got in silently, dripping water all over the passenger seat. For a few miles, it was silent. Then she turned her head and stared at me, her face pale, her eyes completely black. No whites, no pupils. I slammed on the brakes. She didn't move, just kept staring, unblinking. When I looked away for half a second to unbuckle my seatbelt, she vanished. Nodded, opened the door and left. Just gone. The seat was still wet. The smell of rain still heavy in the car. I drove the rest of the way home, shaking like a leaf. When I told my grandpa, he just nodded slowly. "Consider yourself lucky," he said. She only needed a ride. Some of them want more. Next story. There's an abandoned hospital just a few miles from where I live. Everyone in town knows about it. The old Franklin Asylum. They say it shut down overnight, decades ago, after some horrible incident nobody talks about. One night, a few friends dared me to sneak inside alone. Armed with nothing but my phone flashlight, I slipped through a broken window. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of mildew and something metallic, like blood. As I crept down the darkened halls, my light caught glimpses of peeling paint, overturned gurneys, and forgotten wheelchairs. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a scream. I turned a corner and froze. There was a figure standing at the end of the hallway, wearing a tattered hospital gown, head cocked unnaturally to one side. I couldn't see their face. I didn't want to. Slowly, they lifted an arm and pointed straight at me. I ran. I didn't think. I sprinted through the maze of hallways, slipping and crashing into walls. Somehow, I found the broken window and tumbled out onto the grass. When I looked back, there was no one there, just the dark, gaping mouth of the asylum, swallowing the night. I never went back, but sometimes I still feel a cold finger tapping on my shoulder when I walk past that part of town. Next story. Last year, my neighbors moved out of their house in the middle of the night. No warning, no goodbye, just packed up and left. A few weeks later, strange things started happening. Lights flickering in their empty home, curtains shifting even though all the windows were closed, shadows moving in rooms that should have been abandoned. One evening, I saw a figure standing in their upstairs window, tall, thin, unmoving. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to check it out. I climbed over the backyard fence and slipped in through the back door they'd left unlocked. The house was freezing, the air unnaturally still. I made my way upstairs, each step creaking under my weight. The bedroom door was open. Inside, a mirror stood in the center of the room. Huge, old-fashioned, with an ornate frame. But the reflection, it wasn't mine. It was the figure I'd seen, standing just inches from me in the glass, staring with hollow, empty eyes. I turned to run, but there was no one behind me. When I looked back at the mirror, the reflection was smiling. I bolted out of that house and never looked back. The place is still empty. At least, that's what everyone thinks. Next story. There's a trail through the woods behind my neighborhood that nobody uses anymore. Overgrown, forgotten. They say if you follow it far enough, you'll find the stone circle, a ring of mossy boulders where strange things happen after dark. One evening, with nothing better to do, I decided to check it out. The sun was setting as I pushed through the tangled underbrush, following the faint outline of the trail. Birds fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Finally, I found it, the stone circle. At the center stood a tree, dead and blackened, though no fire had ever touched the forest around it. Curious, I stepped closer. Suddenly, I heard whispering, soft, urgent, in a language I didn't understand. The stones around me seemed to hum, vibrating under my feet. Then the ground inside the circle shifted, like something was crawling just beneath the surface. I backed away slowly, heart hammering, but my legs felt heavy, like the air itself was pushing me down. I barely managed to break free, stumbling back through the woods as night fell like a curtain. When I finally made it home, I had scratches on my arms and legs, deep, angry welts. I never found the trail again, no matter how hard I looked. Some paths are better left lost. Next story. It started with a gift left on my doorstep. A small, hand-carved wooden box. No note, no name, nothing to explain it. Inside was a mirror no larger than my palm. Its surface was old, cracked around the edges, but the glass was surprisingly clear. Curious, I placed it on my nightstand. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I thought I heard faint whispering. Too soft to understand, but it pulled me from my dreams, heart pounding. When I opened my eyes, the room was dark, except for the mirror. It was glowing, a faint bluish light swirling inside it, like mist trapped behind glass. Against every instinct screaming at me to look away, I peered into it and saw my reflection, smiling. Only I wasn't smiling. The face in the mirror winked. I threw a blanket over it and tried to sleep. But every few minutes, I swore I heard soft tapping, like fingers against glass. In the morning, the mirror was gone. The box too. But sometimes at night, I catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, as if my reflection is still watching, waiting for me to look again. My friend Marcus always joked about buying weird stuff off the dark web. One night, he showed up with a bizarre little statue, a figure with hollow eyes and outstretched arms, carved from dark, greasy wood. He laughed it off, said it was probably cursed, and put it on his mantle. At first, it was harmless. Doors creaked open on their own. Lights flickered. Typical haunted house cliches. Then Marcus started waking up with scratches on his arms and back. Deep ones too. The kind you couldn't make in your sleep without noticing. One night, he called me in a panic, said he woke up to find the statue at the foot of his bed, even though he swore he left it downstairs. When I got to his house, the place was ice cold. The living room was trashed, furniture overturned, pictures shattered, and there was Marcus sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth, whispering something over and over. He's awake, he's awake, he's awake. The statue was gone, and so was Marcus by morning. His house has been for sale ever since. Nobody ever stays long. Next story. I had a recurring dream for weeks. In it, I stood at the edge of a massive dark pit, a hole that seemed to stretch endlessly downward, the air cold and heavy. Something called to me from below, not words, just feelings. Loneliness, hunger, longing. Each night, I woke up sweating, heart hammering. Then one evening, I took a different route home from work and stumbled across it. An actual pit, in the middle of an abandoned construction site, exactly like the one from my dreams. I don't know what compelled me to get closer. Curiosity, destiny, stupidity. As I stood at the edge, peering down into the void, I felt a sudden urge to jump. Not because I wanted to die, but because it felt like something down there was pulling me, whispering promises I couldn't quite understand. I backed away just in time, heart pounding. Later, I went back, with a flashlight, a rope, and way more caution. But the pit was gone, just a flat, empty lot. Sometimes when I pass that spot, I swear I still hear faint whispers carried on the wind, calling my name. Next story. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway, a cozy cabin deep in the woods. No phones, no internet, just peace. The place looked perfect online. Rustic charm, thick forest all around, a little river nearby. When we arrived though, something felt off. The air smelled strange, like wet iron. The cabin was fine inside, a little dusty, but nothing alarming. Until nightfall, around midnight, we heard it, a tapping at the window. At first, we thought it was branches in the wind, but when we looked, there was nothing there. No trees near the windows, no footprints in the fresh mud outside. The tapping continued. We pulled the curtains closed, turned on every light, tried to shake off the nerves. Then came the humming, soft at first, like a lullaby from some old radio. It grew louder, closer. When I peeked through the curtains, I swear I saw a pale face grinning just inches from the glass. But when I blinked, it was gone. The next morning, there were small handprints all over the outside walls. Too small to be adult, but wrong somehow, with too many fingers. We left in such a hurry, we forgot half our stuff. A few weeks later, I saw the cabin listed again online. New pictures, new owners, same caption, perfect getaway, secluded, private, waiting for you. Next story. I took a job as an overnight security guard at an old museum. Mostly empty halls filled with dusty exhibits, dinosaurs, Egyptian mummies, ancient artifacts. Easy money, they said. The first few nights were uneventful. Just endless rounds, the echo of my boots on the marble floors. But around the fourth night, I started noticing things out of place. A sculpture slightly turned, a rope barrier unhooked, tiny strange footprints in the dust that weren't mine. I chalked it up to my imagination until the night I passed the Egyptian exhibit and saw that the glass case housing an ancient amulet was cracked open. The amulet was gone, and standing just beyond the broken case was a shadow. It wasn't tall, maybe the height of a child, but it was wrong. The proportions, the way it moved. It watched me without eyes, then slowly slipped into the shadows. I called the police. They found no sign of forced entry, no missing exhibits. The amulet was right where it was supposed to be the next morning. The glass repaired, as if it had never been touched. I quit the next day. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still feel that eyeless stare, heavy on my skin. When my grandfather died, he left behind an old oak chest. No key, no instructions. Curiosity got the better of me. I forced it open and found stacks of letters, each one addressed to different people, strangers. But all the letters described horrific deaths, in exact detail. Most were dated decades ago. The last letter was dated 2 days in the future, and it was addressed to me. It described how I would find the chest, and how something inside it had already awakened. Next story. While camping deep in the woods, I heard soft humming at night. Not animal sounds, a human voice. Every night, it grew closer, circling the tent. My flashlight picked up nothing. On the 5th night, I set up cameras. Reviewing the footage, my stomach dropped. A figure, impossibly tall and thin, standing just beyond the firelight, watching. No face, no movement, just endless watching. I packed up and left at dawn, but sometimes, when I'm alone in the woods, I still hear that humming, right behind me. Next story. The abandoned hospital was supposed to be a fun dare. Break in, snap some photos, leave. But once we stepped inside, the air grew thick, metallic, and the doors slammed shut. In the dark, we saw figures moving through the hallways, doctors and nurses in blood-soaked uniforms, pushing empty wheelchairs that squeaked and clattered on the cracked tiles. One by one, my friends disappeared. Their screams echoed down the endless corridors. When I finally found the exit, I realized it was no longer the outside world. It was another wing of the hospital. Next story, I always had the same nightmare. Trapped in a burning house, unable to scream. One night, I woke up to find smoke curling under my bedroom door. Terrified, I fled, only to discover the house perfectly normal. No fire, no smoke, but the smell of burning wood lingered for days. I tried to forget until I moved into a new apartment, hundreds of miles away. On my first night there, I woke up coughing and saw a shadow in the corner, flickering like flame. Next story. It started with a knock at the door, 3 a.m. Reluctantly, I opened it, but no one was there. Just a single photograph on the ground, a picture of me sleeping. Heart hammering, I checked the house, locked tight, nothing inside. But every night after, the knock came. Each time, a new photo, taken closer, more detailed. One night, instead of knocking, the door just creaked open by itself. And I realized the last picture wasn't just of me. It was of someone standing over my bed. Next story. There was a small town off the main highway, unmarked by any sign. I stopped there once, tired, lost. The people were friendly, too friendly. They insisted I stay the night. They gave me a room at the old inn. But that night, I saw them. Figures without faces, their movements jerky, unnatural, peering through my window. When I fled in the morning, the road twisted endlessly, always leading back to the same town square. To this day, no map shows that place. But sometimes, late at night, I still see the sign for the exit and drive faster. Next story. The lake was beautiful, clear and still, surrounded by thick forests. Locals warned me not to swim after dark. Something about the hands. I laughed it off. That night, restless, I went for a swim. The water was glassy, cold. Halfway across, something brushed my leg, a hand. I thrashed, panicked, but more hands grabbed me, pulling me down. I barely made it back to shore, gasping and trembling. When I turned to look back, I saw dozens of pale faces just beneath the surface, staring up at me. Next story, I worked the night shift at a remote gas station. At 2 a.m., a man walked in, soaking wet, shivering, barefoot. He said nothing, just stared at me with hollow eyes. I offered help, but he just pointed behind me. On the security camera, I saw dozens of shadowy figures surrounding the station, pressing against the glass, their faces blank and featureless. When I looked back, the man was gone, and the station doors were wide open, letting the cold night pour in. Next story, we found the house by accident. Hidden deep in the woods, its roof caved in, its walls choked by vines. Inside, everything was untouched, like someone had just left moments ago. A kettle still warm on the stove. Chairs pulled out at the table, dustless. As we explored, we found a journal. Entries describing visitors exactly like us, each one dated decades apart. And the last entry ended with the words, "They're reading this now." Next story, I got a new phone number after moving cities, trying to start fresh. But I started getting voicemails, heavy breathing, faint whispers, no caller ID. One night, a message came through as I was listening live. A voice, clear and sharp. "You can't run forever." Panicked, I smashed the phone, switched providers, new number, new city. But last week, on my brand new phone, I got a text. "Miss me?" My neighbor's dog went missing last winter. It wasn't unusual. Lots of stray animals in our area, coyotes too. But then, the neighborhood cats started vanishing. then someone's goat from the farm down the road. We all blamed predators until we found the tracks. Massive paw prints in the snow, bigger than any dog's, bigger than a bear's even. Deep, heavy prints that moved in a strange pattern, like the creature was walking on two legs. One night, my motion light flicked on in the backyard. I glanced out, expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a deer. Instead, I saw something hunched and massive, covered in black fur, its yellow eyes catching the light. It stood there for a full minute, just staring at my house. Then it turned and loped back into the woods on two legs. The next day, the local news reported unusual wildlife sightings and advised people to keep pets indoors. Nobody said it out loud, but we all knew something else was living in those woods, and it wasn't afraid of us anymore. Next story. When my grandfather died, he left me his house, an old Victorian place out in the country, beautiful but crumbling at the edges. The paperwork took months. I didn't set foot inside until late autumn, when the air was already turning cold. The moment I stepped inside, I felt unwelcome. The floorboards creaked under my feet. The wallpaper was peeling. Dust coated everything. In the dining room, there was an old grandfather clock, the kind that chimed every hour, except it was broken. Had been for decades. Yet as I walked through the house, I heard it ticking. Loud, steady. I thought maybe I was imagining it until midnight, when the clock chimed 12 times. Clear, deep notes that echoed through the empty halls. I tried to find the source, but the clock remained still, its hands frozen at 3:17. That night, I dreamed of a woman in a black dress standing by the clock, whispering my name. When I woke up, there were fresh footprints in the dust, leading from the clock to my bedroom door. The house is still empty now, but every night, the clock chimes, right on time, even though it hasn't worked in 50 years. Next story, I rented a small basement apartment last year. The rent was cheap, too cheap for the area, but I didn't question it. The first few weeks were fine, a little dark, a little damp, but manageable. Then I started hearing noises at night, soft, dragging sounds, a whisper that seemed to come from the walls. I blamed the pipes, the old building, until one night when I saw the outline of a figure pressed against my bedroom wall, like someone was standing behind it, stretching the plaster outward. I ran out and spent the night in my car. The landlord insisted it was just settling noises, but when I moved my bed away from the wall the next day, I found deep scratch marks in the paint, long, thin gouges, as if fingernails had been clawing from the other side. I moved out that weekend. A few months later, I drove by and saw the apartment boarded up, the windows smashed. On the door, a sign, condemned, unsafe structure, do not enter. Sometimes, I still dream of that figure behind the wall, whispering, scratching, waiting. Next story. Growing up, my brother and I had an imaginary friend named Sam. He lived in the attic, according to my brother. I went along with it, thinking it was just make-believe. We'd leave little notes for Sam at the attic door. Sometimes the notes disappeared. Sometimes they came back with new scribbles, childish scrawls none of us could understand. It was fun until the day my brother pushed me down the stairs. When our parents demanded to know why, he said, "Sam told me to." They brushed it off as a childish excuse. But things changed after that. Lights flickered. Toys moved at night. My brother stopped sleeping, whispering to someone only he could see. One night, he screamed so loudly we all woke up. He pointed at the attic door, crying that Sam was angry now. We moved out soon after. Years later, out of curiosity, I looked up the history of the house. Turns out, a boy named Samuel lived there in the 1920s. He died after falling from the attic window. Next story. I took a job as a night janitor at a museum. Easy money, I thought. But every night, certain exhibits moved. Not slightly, massively. A suit of armor would be across the hall. Ancient dolls turned their heads to watch me. One night, I found a display case shattered, an artifact missing. The security footage showed nothing, just the faint outline of something moving toward me. I quit, but sometimes, when I'm alone, I swear I hear the clinking of metal footsteps right behind me. There's a hotel off the interstate that's been abandoned for decades. Locals say it's cursed. One night, driving through a storm, I found myself stranded when my car broke down. With no other options, I saw the hotel's faded neon sign blinking in the distance. I should have known better, but the lobby was dry, and the front desk still had keys. No staff, no guests, just me. I picked a room on the second floor and tried to sleep, but the hallway never stayed quiet. I heard footsteps outside my door, slow, deliberate. Occasionally, I'd see the shadow of someone standing just outside the peephole. When I finally gathered the courage to look, there was no one there. At around 3 a.m., I heard scratching at the door. Faint at first, then frantic. Without thinking, I bolted, ran down the stairs, and into the storm. When I glanced back, every window on the second floor was filled with figures, pale, blurred faces watching me leave. My car started as if nothing had ever been wrong. I didn't stop driving until I crossed 3 counties, and I never looked back. Next story. When I was 12, my cousin dared me to spend the night at the old cemetery outside town. It was supposed to be just a dumb kid's dare. Bring a sleeping bag, stay till morning, win bragging rights. Simple. I made it till around 2 a.m., curled up near one of the oldest tombstones. That's when I heard footsteps. Not slow or hesitant, but running. Heavy, desperate running. They circled me once, twice. I stayed perfectly still, convinced it was my cousin trying to scare me. But when I called out, the footsteps stopped, and then a voice whispered right next to my ear, "You're not supposed to be here." I jumped up and ran, abandoning my sleeping bag and flashlight. The next day, my cousin swore he never showed up. When I returned for my things, the grave I had been sleeping beside was freshly dug, the earth turned and loose. There was no funeral scheduled that week, and the caretaker said nobody had been buried there for years. Next story. When my grandfather passed away, we inherited his old farmhouse. It stood alone on a forgotten stretch of land, surrounded by endless fields and thick woods. The first time I visited, I found an old rocking chair on the front porch, rocking by itself in the still, humid air. Inside, the house smelled like dust and something sweeter, like rotting flowers. We started cleaning up, and that's when we found the basement. It wasn't on any of the blueprints. The door was hidden behind a heavy wardrobe. Down there, it was cold. Much colder than it should have been for summer. We found dozens of jars stacked neatly along the walls. Each jar was filled with murky water, and what looked like dolls made out of twine, bones, and hair. Some had names written on them. One of them had my mother's name. We burned everything. That night, as we drove away, I swear I saw the rocking chair move again. But this time, someone was sitting in it. Someone who looked just like my grandfather. but smiling way too wide. Next story. The house next door had been empty for years. At least, that's what everyone said. So when I started seeing a figure in the upstairs window, a woman in a long white dress, I thought maybe someone had finally moved in. I decided to welcome them, maybe bring a pie. But when I knocked, no one answered. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the place was rotting. Mold, dust, cobwebs. No signs of anyone living there. Yet upstairs, in the bedroom facing mine, the rocking chair by the window was still moving. That night, I watched from my own bedroom. The woman appeared again, pale, unmoving. Her head turned slowly, and for a moment, I could have sworn she was staring right at me. When I finally blinked, she was gone. The next morning, the neighbor's house was demolished. Turns out, it had been condemned for years. There was no way anyone should have been inside. Next story. I picked up an antique mirror at a garage sale. It was cheap, heavy, ornate, too good to pass up. When I brought it home, weird things started happening. At first, it was small. I'd catch movement in the mirror that didn't match the room behind me. A flicker of someone standing just behind my shoulder. Then came the voices, whispers only when I was near the mirror. I tried covering it with a sheet, but at night, I'd hear it shifting, as if something was trying to push through. One evening, I decided enough was enough. I smashed the mirror into pieces, but the reflection didn't shatter right. Instead of my own reflection, I saw a dark figure standing where I should have been, smiling. I tossed the shards into the trash, buried them at the dump. But every mirror I pass now, sometimes it glitches, and sometimes, I swear, I still see that same dark figure waving from the other side. My friend Matt loved to hike off the trails, deep into the woods where no one else went. One weekend, he invited me to join him. Hours into our hike, we found something strange. A perfectly circular clearing where no grass grew. The soil scorched black. In the center stood a stone monolith covered in unfamiliar symbols. Matt touched it, laughed it off. That night, back at camp, he started mumbling in his sleep in a language I couldn't understand. By morning, he was gone. Only his boots remained, placed neatly at the edge of the woods. Next story, I used to walk the same path home every night, cutting through a quiet park. One evening, I noticed a second shadow beside mine, even though no one was around. When I stopped, it stopped. When I walked faster, it kept pace. Finally, I sprinted home, slamming the door behind me. Safe inside, I laughed it off until I saw muddy footprints leading from the front door to my bedroom, but none leading back out. Next story. While cleaning out my late uncle's attic, I found an old music box. When I wound it up, it played a soft, haunting tune. That night, I dreamed of a little girl standing at the foot of my bed, humming the same melody. Every night after that, she got closer. I tried throwing the box away, even burning it, but every morning it was back on my nightstand, playing its song a little louder. Next story. There's a lake outside my hometown where the water is always colder than anywhere else, even in the summer. Legend says it's cursed, that something waits beneath. My friends dared me to swim across it. Halfway through, the water turned icy, and something brushed against my leg. Something large. I kicked and thrashed to the other side. Climbing onto the dock, I looked back and saw pale hands reaching just below the surface, disappearing when I blinked. Next story. When my grandmother passed away, We inherited her old Victorian house. The first night there, I heard footsteps pacing above me, even though the upstairs was empty. Each night, the footsteps grew heavier, angrier. One evening, I finally built up the nerve to check. I found the upstairs bedroom door ajar, slowly creaking open. Inside, in the corner, was a rocking chair, swaying violently on its own, even though the air was still. Next story. After moving into my new place, I noticed my cat staring at the same corner of the living room every night, hissing and growling. One night, I decided to sit in that spot. As soon as I did, a crushing weight settled on my chest and a cold voice whispered in my ear, "Get out." I moved apartments 2 weeks later. My cat stopped growling, but sometimes, at exactly midnight, he still stares at the empty corner and trembles. Next story. On a dare, I visited the ruins of an old asylum with a group of friends. We laughed and joked, trying to scare each other. Then we found the chair, rusted, bolted to the floor, with worn leather restraints. Someone dared me to sit in it. The moment I did, the temperature dropped, and I heard a scream. Not from my friends, but from the walls themselves. When I tried to stand, I couldn't move. Something held me there until the chair finally snapped apart, throwing me to the floor. Next, my little brother used to talk about the man with no face who visited him at night. We brushed it off as nightmares. Then one night, I woke up to see someone standing by my bed, tall, featureless, watching. Frozen with fear, I blinked, and he was gone. But the next morning, my brother was missing. His window was open, curtains fluttering in the breeze. We never found him, but sometimes I catch a glimpse of him outside, standing beside the man with no face. Next, I was hired to clear out an abandoned hotel slated for demolition. Room after room was empty, dusty, broken furniture, peeling wallpaper. But in room 409, the bed was freshly made, and the air smelled like perfume. As I stepped inside, the door slammed shut. I heard giggling, a woman's voice, soft but chilling. When I finally forced the door open, the hallway was different, faded, black and white, as if I had stepped into another time. I ran without looking back. Next, during a summer job cataloging artifacts at a museum, I found an old mirror hidden in storage. It was covered in a dusty cloth. When I uncovered it, my reflection didn't move with me. It stared, grinning wickedly, while I stood frozen in fear. The next day, the mirror was gone from storage. But at night, in my apartment, I kept catching glimpses of it, and the grinning reflection in any shiny surface I passed. Next, the first time I saw the man in the suit. He was standing across the street from my house, motionless. I thought he was lost, but every day after, he was there. Same black suit, same dead stare, same distance. He never moved. One night, I decided to confront him. I crossed the street, but when I got there, he was gone. I turned around, and there he was, standing right behind me, closer than ever before.